how much of a different beast Hezbollah is. Hamas is...
They're not really an expeditionary force, although they can cause a lot of trouble on the world stage. If someone is fighting in the information domain, if they are part of a weapon system hardpoint in the information domain, why are we not treating them as targets? You buy a drill because you want a hole, right? Nobody collects drills.
I don't collect holes either. I'm not a woodpecker. I mean, I don't know.
All right. But you get the idea, right? So...
I get your premise, but like you got to follow it through. What's the hole for?
Exactly. What's the hole for? So why do you buy a weapon? You don't buy a weapon to buy a weapon. You buy a weapon for its effects, right? So a weapon is really an effector. TikTok is a weapon. Information war is a weapon. Information war is the drill that creates the hole. A bunch of information warfare agents encouraging weak-minded people to go shut down a bridge. And that's why we need to kill these people.
This is The Global Gambit.
Israel, Hezbollah, the Middle East, disinformation, all keywords that we're going to be covering again in this part 2. We had a part 1 focusing on Ukraine and Russia in its entire, well, as much as we could within sort of a 40-minute capacity. But I did get a new glass of wine for this part 2, because always you start firstly with white wine and then you go to red wine. That's how you're supposed to consume beverages of this alcoholic nature. Anyway, slight facetious aside, we're rejoined by Ryan Macbeth. It's a fantastic opportunity to speak with someone who is an intelligence analyst, software architect, cybersecurity guy, and as I like to come up with, disinfo debunker, and content creator, to be fair. He's very prominent on YouTube, and if you don't know who Ryan is, do go and check him out. But anyway, Ryan, thank you very much for joining part 2.
Thank you so much for inviting me.
You see, guys, we know what we're doing over here. With Ryan, it's always a little bit more of a fun experience. Not that it isn't with my other guests, but we don't edit out. This is not meant to be some sort of super official, over-edited experience. Anyway, Ryan, so you cover a lot of different things in the nexus of disinformation, fact, truth, and warfare. And, you've been doing a lot with the Israeli situation as well in Gaza now, but also potentially with Hezbollah. You're meant to be going out there at the moment, and in the run-up to this potential sort of moment, what have you been mainly focusing on? What has caught your eye in this region?
Well, one of the things that's kind of interesting about Hezbollah is that Hezbollah is not Hamas. Hezbollah, they're the varsity team. Like they have many modern weapons. They have many modern anti-tank weapons. They might have surface-to-air missiles. I saw a parade a couple of days ago where they had mortar carriers, or the 122 millimeter. I forget the darn name of it. It's like the 3S1. I might be getting that wrong. I can't remember the name of the Russian mortar carrier, but it is a 122 self-propelled gun. So. Like, these guys are the real thing. They're the real deal. They are essentially an army that is complementary to Lebanon's army. So, like, that's almost like a parallel shadow army that is almost as good as, or in some cases maybe better than Lebanon's army. And that is just not something that a lot of people can really comprehend, like how different Hezbollah is than Hamas. So I might be going up to Israel for this. I don't know, I have to see, because I still work for the government. And because of that, like, there's various hoops that I have to jump through to get permission to go overseas. But yeah, it's I would definitely be on the lookout for whether this kind of simmering conflict between Hezbollah and Israel kind of spills over, because that's not going to be good for anybody, but especially Hezbollah.
No, and we've had a couple of guests on the show before, Ryan Boll of Rain Network and Liz Sly of the Washington Post, who've both really made it abundantly clear how much of a different beast Hezbollah is. Hamas is one thing, and this is not a dismissal of the threat that they pose to Israelis or as just a force, but Hezbollah is more powerful than many members of NATO. They have 150, 200,000 projectiles or thereabouts, although they've used quite a few of them, I think, in their cross-border clashes with Israel over the past several months. Where do you see this sort of going? From my understanding, Israel wants to try to, preemptively, secure its northern border. And to paraphrase one, I think it was official from the IDF that was basically insinuating that they're all geared up and ready to go. Hezbollah is always going to be a threat. Why not just deal with them now at the same time that they're already active? Got 500,000 reservists. Why not just deal with the problem? You think that's a bizarre take, or what's your thoughts?
So it's not a bizarre take, but one of the there's a couple of things to that. The first is that for every Israeli reservist that you have serving the army instead of working at their software company, that is, the army is essentially paying their salary differential. So you have guys who are not getting conscript pay; they're essentially getting differential pay. So, they might get, it was 2,000 shekels a month. I might be wrong about that, 2,500 shekels a month for their army pay. But then the army makes up the difference from the pay that they would get, as in their civilian job. And you can only do that for so long. A country like Israel can only do that for so long. The U.S. can probably do that indefinitely. Israel just doesn't necessarily have the financial resources to keep that up. So there is that thought of we have all these reservists, we can send them against Hezbollah right now. And that is something that you can say, but actually doing it is going to be a heck of a lot harder. And I think what you might see is a situation that is similar to what we saw in the first Gulf War, where Israel would chill out for about 8 weeks and just bomb the crap out of Hezbollah and try to attrit them that way before they actually go in for a ground invasion to try to clear them out completely. But that's kind of a problem there too, because if Israel takes 8 weeks to do that, then one of the issues that kind of pops up is that Israel, they need to, they're going to have to hold the world at bay. Because every time they drop a bomb, what you're going to see is you're going to see more misinformation. And in some cases, not misinformation, but genuine, honest to God mistakes that were made. And those go up on Twitter and people go, oh my God, why is Israel doing this? They're still doing this. Why are we supporting Israel? And that's going to be an issue as well. So it's kind of there's that question. You can either try to attrit Hezbollah through bombing and then try to go in, which will save the lives of a lot of soldiers. But if you go that route, then the world is probably going to get really angry at you, and you're going to have to figure out how to hold the world at bay while you attrit Hezbollah to the point where you can actually go in. And so it's kind of a lose-lose situation for Israel. I'm not really sure how they will handle this in the end.
Okay, but to quote another question, or reiterate another question I had for a fellow guest, because I think it is worth considering. Hezbollah has made some pretty notable statements a couple of weeks ago, or at the time when this really began to gather momentum, which was they basically threatened Cyprus, which by extension is threatening the UK because of their because of the military bases in the south, which in extension is NATO. Not necessarily that the NATO or Britain would get involved, but this is a multiplier effect, or whatever, a knock-on effect. Why? And second, also Iran, right? I want to bring in both sides, the escalation on both sides, right? You've got the Western potential incorporation and Iran, because this is their flagship proxy. This isn't Hamas, which is sort of a bit of a weird relationship. It's their most potent force, other than the IRGC itself.
Yeah, I don't know how much of a factor Iran's going to be. I think that Iran's almost like they went oh man, we bit off a little more than we could chew, right?
Okay.
They got a little too much world attention by arming the Houthis, assisting in that operation with Hezbollah or with Hamas in Gaza.
Right.
And, I think Iran has to walk this fine line because, Iran is the problem, right? At the end of the day, and I hate to say this because I have a lot of fans in Iran, but the Iranian government, not the Iranian people are great, but the Iranian government is the problem. And I think what they don't want is the rest of the world getting together and going, you know what, we're just done with you guys. Because that's gonna people who are in power, they tend to want to stay in power. That's their biggest fear, is losing power. So I don't know. I don't really necessarily see Iran kind of doing anything else that's going to get them further world attention. That makes any sense to you? So, Hezbollah can say a lot of things. They're not really an expeditionary force, although they can cause a lot of trouble on the world stage just by doing things like making life hard in the Mediterranean Sea, or launching rockets at Israel. And at some point, Israel is going to have to say, like, guys, we're done. We're done. We're going to make sure that this never happens again, and we're just going to go in. And that's a dilemma, right? I've always said, I have it on my knife back there. You want to create dilemmas, not problems, for your adversary, right? And right now, Israel is kind of in that dilemma where if they don't attack Hezbollah, they're just going to keep getting rocketed. But if they do attack Hezbollah, they're going to get a heck of a lot of casualties. And they may have world opinion come down on them to the point where they're not going to be able to have an effective operation, or to execute an effective operation.
Okay. So one of the things you've been doing in your, spare time, in your prime time, in the sense of you do it so well, is debunking disinformation. And something you did recently was one about our American soldiers in Israel. Now, I mean, America obviously has a strong presence in the seas around Israel, and the support by extension that it's giving the IDF. But, actual troops on the ground in Gaza or in the north of the country on the border with Lebanon, not really sure that's the case. Where do you see the most prevalent areas of disinformation in Israel, and some of the themes that you see people trying to employ there?
I would say that in Israel itself, I've seen exactly 3 cases of genuine disinformation. One was the 40 beheaded babies, which hopefully you don't get demonetized for that one. The other one was someone created an AI-generated armory underneath. They said, "Oh, this armory was found underneath a hospital in Gaza," and that was a lie. And the third thing was someone said this was an F-15 shooting down an Iranian drone. They posted a video, and it was from the video game DCS. So, coming out of Israel, I can say honestly that I've seen 3 genuine cases of misinformation. But almost everything coming out of Gaza from the Palestinian side it's all misinformation. It's just literally everything coming out of Gaza is a lie. There is some truth there. There are civilians who are getting killed. There are some civilians that are having a really hard time finding food or finding shelter. You can also assume, like, you look at a place like Israel, or you look at a place like Gaza, there's a finite amount of medical resources. And if you have cancer, if you have diabetes, are you getting any of that care? Are you getting the care that you need? Or is priority going to people who, have traumatic amputations, or who've been shot, or who have shrapnel, right? And that's bad, right? So there are things that are definitely going on in Israel that are going on in Gaza that are true. But so much that's coming out of there is a lie that it is absolutely insane, the amount of misinformation that comes out of Gaza. And I think a lot of it's that people are primed to believe it. They want to believe that Israel is the bad guy. either because they make money by being the iconoclast. Like, what's crazy is you figured that out without me even giving you the first syllable of his name. Yeah, Jackson Henkel.
I know Jackson.
I
He's a scumbag, wannabe loser who the first time I ever met Jackson, fun story for you for a second, was after that missile that was intercepted. So the Russians being the Russians,
Yeah.
or Kremlin being the Kremlin, multiple launches into Ukraine. Ukraine intercepts some of the missiles, and then some of the shrapnel and remnants of the missile landed in Poland. This was like November, October 2022. It was the first, NATO state where there was a missile involved, right? And he came in. It was on Twitter. We were having a conversation about it on those Twitter Spaces, and he came in, and he was very insistent that he be let up on stage. At this point, he had about 85,000 followers. I had like 4, as in 4, not 4,000. But I was moderating in this space, and he wanted to come up. And I didn't know who he was, and no idea what his agenda was. And I was like, yeah, sure, we'll bring you up. We've got a bit of a full stage, and we're just moving through the motions, getting through the speakers, just being fair to people. He's very pushy, and I began to get a little bit alienated by his attitude. And then I started looking through his profile. Oh, okay. And then I started taking the piss, and I've still got all the messages on there. I've got screenshots and everything. But anyway, he's a despicable. I mean, I don't know, should I swear on this? He's the most, I think, unsavory character I've ever met in any forum, like online or in person. So yeah, So I know exactly who you mean the moment you mention it. But sorry, go ahead if you had anything else to say. But there's my
what I can't do is I can't figure that one out.
What, him?
I is it money? It's gotta be money. Like it's gotta be like you just don't have the skills or something to make a living. And there was this Russian bot. They're known as Captain Coronado on Twitter. And it's a Russian bot, and I proved that it was a Russian bot. I made a whole video about this, how this guy's a Russian bot. And, I did that back when the person had 20,000 followers. So I made a video about the guy, or about this bot account. The guy blocked me, and now he has 80,000 some followers. And I still have about 30,000 on Twitter. And it's like, how do you win? It's so easy. It is so easy to gain followers if you go negative and you lie. Like, that's how people should know that I'm not lying when I talk about Ukraine, when I talk about Israel. Because if I was lying, I'd have more followers. Let's seriously.
Me too.
Do you have any idea how much this sucks to be restricted to telling the truth about stuff and being honest? If I was lying, it'd be great. I'd have millions of followers. I wouldn't be worried about how I'm going to pay my mortgage, and I got 20 more days to freaking pay my mortgage.
Well, that's not
my
you.
God. It'd be great.
I wanted to share this image because what you were saying earlier very much reminded me of it, which is in 2017, you know already the one I'm talking about, but this one was such an illustration of the extent that the Kremlin and certain other individuals will go to. So this is a perfect illustration of what I'm talking about. This image from 2017, so it was of a video game, and I'm sure you know this example, but for me, it was the first time when I really became really interested in, like, military disinformation, of covert, like, sleight of hand or whatever, misdirection, disillusionment. And, on the left here, viewers, we have an image, a still from a video game. This is a video game that is called
Modern Warfare or something?
Something like that. No, a smartphone game, AC-130 Gunship Simulator. So it's a simulator game where if you've ever played COD, in 2009, Modern Warfare 2, one of my favorite games of all time, you play in the co-op, you play as the AC-130, right? So you are high in the sky, and you've got your infrared, you've got your heat maps, right? This is a video game illustration. So what the Kremlin did was take that, repurpose it, blur it a little bit, remove or zoom in enough as you can see, so it gets rid of this section and this, and it looks. And they were basically claiming that this was the Americans supplying and supporting ISIS in Syria. It's that kind of extent that people will go to for video games, which for disinformation, which I find absolutely harrowing, but also fascinating at the same time, right? But you do this all the time, Ryan, and I guess this
Russia essentially. I'm sorry, Russia essentially invented that. It's called active measures. One of the things that so I guess one good example is nuclear winter. So back in the early 1980s, Carl Sagan kind of came up with this theory that if there's a nuclear war, a lot of dust would be kicked up into the atmosphere. It could cause global temperatures to drop. And that was done with some of the computer technology we had back in the 1980s. But Russia heard about that, and they started pushing this narrative of, oh my God, nuclear winter. That's why America shouldn't have Pershing missiles in Eastern Europe. And so Russia is very good at creating these false narratives to push an agenda, because they can't afford 11 aircraft carriers, right? But what they can do is they can pay a troll factory to sit inside a room and make up lies, and hopefully some of them stick. There was another rumor that AIDS was actually created in Fort Detrick, Maryland, as a bioweapon. Russia spread that. It's constant. They constantly do this. They're constantly lying.
How do you keep up with that? How do you, as an individual, one singular person, try to counteract as best you can each individual case? Because the more we try, for every one person that tries to be decent enough to prevail the truth, there's another 10 bots that are doing the opposite, or people who are so lacking in any human decency that they will employ bots, or that, all the grifters online, be it Jackson Hinkle, be it Lord Bebo, be it friggin', so many that I can name. How do you retain that degree of momentum and motivation? Because it's hard.
You don't. You lose. I hate to put it that way, but that's the look. Until we start killing these people, and that's something that I've advocated for. That if you are a foreign agent and you are acting if you are acting in the disinformation space, or if you were engaging in disinformation warfare against the United States, you should be treated like a combatant. And whether that means putting a Tomahawk missile through someone's window, or using other kind of measures to take out that target, or maybe using a cyber attack to destroy equipment, we need to start taking this seriously. And the only way people will start taking this seriously is if we start killing them. And I have stood up on stages in front of a podium, and I have laid out my whole plan to do that. I find people. That's kind of what I used to do, and I kind of still do too. With when I worked for Accenture, I used to work with what's called C4ISR software. I found bad guys. And C4ISR, Command Control Communications, Computers, Intelligence, Surveillance, Reconnaissance. I found the bad guys, and then I would give this information to my client, and my client would then do whatever they needed to do with that information. Right? So I find people. And, we need to start killing these people. And once we start doing that, maybe people will think, maybe I should get a job at McDonald's instead. Maybe that's a little bit safer. Look, if you're a civilian and you're working at a munitions plant, are you a valid target? Absolutely. Munitions plant is a perfectly valid target. So if someone is fighting in the information domain, if they are part of a weapon system hardpoint in the information domain, why are we not treating them as targets? So I think that this stuff can end once we start kinetically targeting these disinformation actors.
But
I have been saying that for over a year now.
But you're essentially suggesting that we need to not rewrite, but we need to severely amend something like the UN Geneva Convention, international humanitarian law of armed conflict, whatever way you want to put it, to better incorporate. I personally think we need a great modern. One second, no, but like I think we seriously need a modernization of like ethnic cleansing needs to be included as a basic legal term these days. I think the war to bring it back to the regional discussion, I think there are a few things that we seriously need to reevaluate. I personally have my strong reservations with the extent that the Israelis have done things in Gaza or surrounding the war in Gaza. Without going into that too much, we can if you want, but like, do you think it's time that we updated humanitarian law to better consider modern aspects of, everything you've touched upon, information warfare, digital things, drones, open question for you.
Absolutely. We need to do at least three things. One of the things we need to update is our law on, can you surrender to a drone? How do you do that? Because right now I don't have any idea of how you surrender to a drone. There's really nothing in the Geneva Convention that talks about that, because it was, I think the last time it was really updated was 1949. So we need to do that. We need to update what it means to be considered an item of public curiosity. So that's number two.
What's an item
sure,
of public
so
curiosity?
Right now, if you capture a prisoner and you take a cell phone picture or cell phone video of that prisoner, when the war in Ukraine first started, the Red Cross was posting messages saying, please do not share pictures like this. It's against the Geneva Convention. Well, is it though? Because everybody has a smartphone now. And I think the whole idea of display as public curiosity means you can't take a prisoner and then parade them through the town square with people throwing fruit at them, right? That's bad. You can't do that. But taking a picture of them and posting it on Facebook, maybe a family member would like to know that soldier is still alive. So we need to figure that one out too. We need to modernize what is considered putting someone on public display if everybody has a camera in their pocket. And we also need to figure out the definition of what is a combatant. And I personally, I think that I don't even think we need to go to the Geneva Convention. If you're acting in an information system capacity or an information warfare capacity, you are a combatant. End of story. You made your choice when you signed on to that company to spread misinformation. And I'll put it another way. When you buy a drill, do you buy a drill because you want a drill, or do you buy a drill because you want a hole? You buy a drill because you want a hole, right? Nobody collects drills, right? You bought a drill because you're like, man, I really need a hole.
I don't collect holes either. I'm not a woodpecker. I mean, I don't know.
All right, but you get the idea, right? So
I get your premise, but like you got to follow it through. What's the hole for? So I hope it's
the hole could be exactly. What's the hole for? So why do you buy a weapon? You don't buy a weapon to buy a weapon. You buy a weapon for its effects, right? So a weapon is really an effector. Now let's say you have a bridge. The enemy has a bridge, and you want to prevent the enemy from using that bridge. Well, there's a couple of ways you could do that. You might launch a missile at that bridge, right? And that will affect that bridge so the enemy can't cross it. You might launch a cyber attack against that bridge so the bridge gates won't go up, or let's say it's a drawbridge, it gets stuck in the up position.
Okay.
Or you could have a bunch of cyber warfare, information warfare people create a campaign on TikTok that tells people we need to shut down the bridge for Palestine. The effect is exactly the same. You've just denied use of that bridge. You've just used a weapon system. TikTok is a weapon system. I guarantee you that if TikTok had not been forced to sell to an American company, if China ever invaded Taiwan, the very next day there would be TikTok videos telling people, go glue yourselves to the sides of Navy ships. That way they can't leave because Taiwan has always been Chinese. Americans are just trying to be colonialist, imperialist, puppet masters. TikTok is a weapon. Information war is a weapon. Information war is the drill that creates the hole. You can create that hole with a missile. You can create that hole with a bunch of information warfare agents encouraging weak-minded people to go shut down a bridge. And that's why we need to kill these people. And I know how that sounds, and that sounds very harsh, but you know what? Killing people is very harsh. And if you choose to engage in information warfare, that's fine. You're a combatant.
So continuing down this pathway of what one did not expect, IHL is quite a, well, there's a lot of grey area, which is why it is what it is. To define combatant versus non-combatant, okay, a lot of it I think is also location dependent. So the strike on, well, I'll use this example from our previous episode, right? So the missile on Kiev on July 8th, the Russians stated they did so because it was full of Ukrainian soldiers that were being tended to. However, by doing so, they illustrated their idiocy around international humanitarian law, because you're still not supposed to strike POWs, particularly in a clinic or a non-warfare, non-combatant site. If someone is injured, they are by default a non-combatant, right? So the Russians, in even themselves, the Kremlin in and of itself. Yes, I know you might have a comment there. I'm using this as an example. If you want to add a comment on that, that's fine. But my main question is this, which is, how does one in the virtual space, the digital space, actually define when someone is a combatant or isn't, right? If they're in your mind, it might be very clear, but for me, who's not in your space, it seems a slippery slope to use that term again. How do we
it's trivial.
clarify this? Go ahead. Sorry.
It's trivial. It's trivial to figure. So there's it's trivial to figure out who's actually behind some of this stuff. You can figure out. My God, I know when they go to work. I know when they eat lunch. It's actually trivial to actually figure out who's doing it, and it's trivial to trace these accounts back to where they're actually coming from, even to the physical building, from which they're coming from. So, it's really not that difficult to do.
But Ryan, what power does that put you in as the person that I don't know, like, you have the unprecedented ability to determine where these people are at all walks at any time of day. But like, so what? We as the government utilize you as our full point of contact to determine whether or not this person is a combatant or non-combatant, and therefore they're fully.
You wouldn't just, so whenever you do any kind of targeting, there is this whole process you go to. It's not like, well, have the government ask Ryan Macbeth whether this guy is a bad guy or not and where he's at, and we're going to put a T-lamb through his window. It's not that easy, right? When you're doing any kind of targeting, you put together a targeting package, and there's also something called NCV, non-combatant cutoff value. So if you're looking for, let's say, Daddy El Baddie, there might be an NCV of 0, meaning like, hey, you can strike Daddy El Baddie, but everybody that's around that guy has to be a bad guy too. Because if there's any civilians, you're not allowed to strike. If it's an NCV of 5, it means you're allowed to kill 5 people before you have to get approval from higher to kill any more innocent people. So there's a whole targeting package that goes through that sort of thing before anyone does anything. So yeah, I would say don't worry about it. We have this covered. One of the things America does really well is we're very good at finding bad guys and putting a hellfire through their window. We know how to do that, really.
So then why aren't individuals like Hinkle Tinkle, like Bebo Weebo, like, I don't know, I'm just trying to find sort of rhyming terms for these numbnuts.
Yeah.
Why are we not actually doing anything about them? Right? I get it. X is a private company. Musk can kind of do what he wants. But these guys are they not representing a national security crisis at this point? The guy lives in Miami he was dating a Russian girl. Why aren't we doing anything?
Yes, they are. Now, I can tell you that when it comes to American citizens, you can't do some of that stuff. All right? You can't target American citizens.
For what?
But foreigners, yeah, you can target. Why are we not doing it? I think a lot of it's that our government, the American government, really hasn't woken up to the threat yet, which is why I go on stage and I say, hey, we need to start thinking about this thing, because this is how we're going to be fighting the next war. It's going to be this information war, public opinion, where you can convince enough weak-minded people to glue themselves to Navy ships so the ships can't leave. That's a weapon system, right? So I don't know why we're not doing it. Probably because we've never had to deal with that before. We're really good with using our aircraft carriers and our tanks and our Patriot missiles as offensive weapons, right? We're good at that. But because we've never had to operate in an environment where we're dealing with degraded funding or a degraded condition where we have to use this kind of information warfare or infowar dom or asymmetric warfare, that's kind of a blind spot for us. So I think other countries, such as Iran, such as Russia, who can't necessarily afford the best weapon systems or aircraft carriers or whatever, they kind of move toward information warfare because it's cheap and it works. And if you can, look, you can spend money to develop weapon systems to destroy Ukrainian equipment, or you can spend maybe a tenth of that budget on a room full of trolls to convince Americans not to give Ukraine equipment. Either way, Ukraine doesn't have the equipment. They either don't have the equipment because they never got the equipment, or they don't have the equipment because you blew it up. But one of these things is less expensive. So that's why Russia engages in information warfare. It's a lot cheaper than actually creating the weapon systems that will actually do the killing. So
No, I agree, and I think that it comes back to what you said earlier, which is the sort of the cost benefit analysis. Essentially, the Russians are able to, despite their GDP per capita and everything else, cause a heck of a load of mayhem in not just America but the West more broadly, and it's very effective. These troll farms. But then, how do we deal with these troll farms? Well, we can't, because
we kill them.
I
mean, I hate to. That's how we deal with it. And once we start killing a few of those people, they'll go, man, maybe I don't need to work here anymore.
Very morbid. All right.
Well, you don't think? Look, man, if you go to Ukraine, they're not exactly holding hands with the Russians, right? I mean, that's kind of what this is about. It's about causing loss of life until the adversary either cannot physically continue or you've broken their will to continue.
So do you think
that's the way it is?
But do you think it's a bit of a mindset change? Do you think that we need to be re-entering a bit more of a wartime mentality? That Europe and the West more broadly have been too cushy for too long, about sort of that we've lived in the peace dividend, to quote a Bloomberg article, right? You know, we've forgotten what it means to really face utmost adversity, right? That we have to deal with the fact that we might have to kill people, whatever that means, right? You think we need to?
For the longest time, we've, at least when it comes to America, we're protected on both sides by two big oceans. And so we've always taken a look at conflict as something that happens someplace else, right? And now, kind of the chickens have come home to roost in the sense that, like, we might actually be facing adversaries that are using information warfare to disrupt America in ways that can turn kinetic. If someone shuts down a bridge and people in an ambulance can't get across that bridge to the hospital, people could die, right? But we're not at that point yet. And again, that's one of the reasons why I keep going around telling people, like, hey, we might need to start thinking of this.
Okay. Very last question for you then, to bring it full circle. We started off talking about Israel-Palestine or Israel-Lebanon. How should we as observers, how should we as recipients of all this information, it's quite a big sensory overload, what would you, similar to part one, follow? Firstly, in the region itself, Israel and Lebanon and Hezbollah and all that. Second, for the people who react to it, the people who are trying to persuade us of wrong information, if that makes sense.
So how would you are you saying, how do you find the truth?
Yeah,
like, where do you find the truth?
How do you ensure that you're better prepared to deal against the Hinkle Tinkles and the Lord Bebos and the other
So the first is sourcing, right? That's kind of the first thing you have to look at. If somebody is providing sources and those sources are reliable, you should probably view them with more credibility than somebody who is not providing sources. So that's number one, right? There's a lot of people who will throw up those 3 sirens and say, breaking news, America is launching nuclear bombers at whatever, right? All right, well, what's your source, right? And there might be a video, and then you later find out that video is an exercise of planes from a month ago, right? So that's kind of number one. It's who is saying this, what's the source, and who does it benefit, right? So if someone isn't providing sourcing, don't listen to them. And if they are providing sourcing, who is the source? If the source is Al Jazeera, well, you might have to take that with a grain of salt because they've lied about a lot of stuff. And if the source is the New York Times, you might have to take that with a grain of salt as well, because half the time they don't know what the hell they're looking at, right? I did a whole video about how the New York Times it was 28,000 employees and only 8 of them were military. Like 8. Yeah. It is 2,800.
No way!
8,
I haven't
8.
seen that video. Wow!
Yeah. So you look it up. It's it's called "Why the New York Times Gets It Wrong." 8, and what's funny is that
there you go. There's a job opening for you. You can become the head of the military.
Oh God! Well, number one, they couldn't afford me. But number two, the idea of ever working for the idea of ever working a job again, like where I have to go into work and have a boss. And, I don't mind working for Newsmax because I don't really have a boss, right? Like I go, I do my hit, I come on, I do my talking head thing, I talk about Iran's missiles, but the idea of going into work and having a boss, and it's already bad enough working for the Texas Aeromed Lab where I do have a boss. And we have to have meetings, and we're going to come to a consensus. I'm like, oh God,
consensus.
I don't want to do this. I just want to write papers and speeches and stuff.
Okay.
But yeah, I think that would be. Usually government sources tend to be the best sources for information. But again, look at what people are posting. Look at the sources, and just kind of, if they don't have any sources, that should be your first clue that there's a lie going.
Okay. And what about in the region itself?
For sources?
No, I don't know. What should people follow? What should we? Israel-Palestine, Israel. I want to bring it full circle.
What should people follow?
Yeah. Well, I don't know.
Well, you should be watching what Hezbollah is doing. And what Hezbollah is saying, especially on their social media. I am of the opinion that Hezbollah does not want to fight Israel. Kind of in the same way that, I don't know if you've ever had a dog. You ever have a dog in a leash, and the dog is a tough guy as long as he's on the leash. He's tugging on the leash, then you take the leash off, and they're like, whoa, put that thing back on, right? I can't act tough. If I have the leash off, right, then I might have to back it up. So look, if you're in Hezbollah, you're getting paid money. You're getting paid a monthly salary. You've worked your way up to colonel. You have a family. You might want to destroy Israel, but we're having a barbecue tomorrow with the other family, right? You really want all this to go away? Because if there's a war, all this could go away, right? So I actually look at Hezbollah, and Hezbollah is almost like, the people who are in Hezbollah want to be there, but in a way it's almost like a jobs program, right? And their life is pretty good because they're getting that steady paycheck, which really is coming from Iran at the end of the day. So how badly do they really want to fight, right? So that could be kind of a thing. If you notice, Hezbollah, when Hamas invaded Gaza, Hezbollah issued this whole statement of, yes, we're going to stand strong with you guys. And then they did pretty much nothing. They launched a couple of missiles. That was it, right? They didn't, if they had actually invaded Israel when the soldiers, or when the militia invaded Israel from Gaza, if Hezbollah came in from the north, that would have been a problem. They're not going to push Israel into the sea, but it would have been a heck of a lot harder to take care of. So they kind of missed their window there for actually executing against Israel. So I don't know if they want to do that when they have Israeli soldiers who have had 9 months of combat exposure. If you survive for 9 months being rotated in and out of combat, you probably know what you're doing now, and you're a lot more lethal than you were 9 months ago. So I don't know if you really want to go up against an army like that. All right, it might just be easier to stay on the leash.
Yeah, no, I agree.
Yeah.
I mean, Hamas, as we said earlier on, are this entity that were never really exactly the same as Hezbollah or the Houthis or any other proxy group that Iran influences. And Hezbollah really didn't follow through on the strong statements that they gave. And I think it's that fact that the more institutionalized, the more formalized the group becomes, right? The more it's like it's also got a strong political arm, a governing entity. Like it doesn't lose all that. It basically governs Lebanon as much as the Lebanon government does, right?
Essentially, right. It's the shadow government.
Yeah, shadow opposition, shadow government. That's why Lebanon itself is being pulled in, and I want to do an episode on that. But Ryan, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for your very generous time in both segments. Everybody, give this man a round of applause. Give him a like. We'll just go and subscribe to his channel. I mean, he doesn't need his, and we need him to reach 1 million before the end of 2024. That's I think what we need to do. I mean, I wanted to reach 100,000, but we're working there. We're both working our own way. So, but Ryan, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure. Everybody, if you enjoyed the conversation, give it a like, give it a subscribe. We'll definitely have Ryan back, hopefully, for more episodes, maybe one of our roundups as we do every weekend. And I wish you all the best. Peace of mind. Take care.